Hey guys, welcome back to the MCU HQ, and here is my spoiler review for Black Panther Wakanda Forever. If you have not seen this movie yet, please leave, because I'm about to spoil all of the big things that happen in this movie, and I don't want to ruin it for you. So, click off this video, go watch it, and come back, unless, of course, you really don't care about spoilers, in which case, stay here, and I will tell you everything. So, the way this is going to work, I'm not doing play-by-play of the movie. I'm not even talking about it in order. I just wrote up a few different things I wanted to talk about in depth that I couldn't in my non-spoiler review. And just talk about some things. It's not scripted. We're going to see what happens. Okay, I think the logical place to start here is to talk about the bookends of the movie, which is the opening and the ending, the two silent moments of the film, and easily the two most emotional moments of the film, I feel. So, this movie opens in an incredible way. I think I remember it being all one shot. Now, granted, I have only seen the movie once. I'll probably watch it again next weekend. But coming off at one time, I'm pretty sure the opening of the movie, until Angela Bassett walks into the room, is a one take. And it starts completely black, and you just hear Letitia Wright's voice praying to Bast, who she does not believe in, but she's at that point where she's like, help me save my brother, and I'll never doubt your existence again. And you're like, shit, this is gonna be sad. And she's running into her lab, she's trying to find a cure, and you hear, it's so well done, you hear her AI saying, oh, his heartbeat's dropped, and it's at 31 BPM or whatever, and Shuri finally thinks she has the heart-shaped herb. She's making a synthetic heart-shaped herb, which is a great plot point that kind of runs through the movie that I'll talk about here in a little bit when I talk about the third act. She thinks she finally has one that'll work. It's not a good chance. It's a very low chance, but she says, well, this is the best we're going to do. And then you see Angela Bassett walk in. And then as the audience, before anything happens, it clicks with you. T'Challa just died. And so if you're not crying then, you then hear... what's another great moment, which, fuck, I might cry saying it. Shuri asks her AI, what's my brother's heartbeat? And Ramonda says, your brother is with the ancestors. And then we cut to the funeral after that. Which, goddamn, this movie almost got me in the first 5 minutes, because we have the funeral going around, but it's really a celebration of life. You know, you've got everyone dancing, yada yada, and then the casket with T'Challa on there that kind of gets beamed up, and it's the saddest Marvel Studios fanfare ever, because it's just Chadwick. It's lines that T'Challa said. It's a bunch of Black Panther scenes. It's all Chadwick in this intro. And there's no music over it. It's just, you hear wind in the background, and you could have heard a pin drop in the theater. Everyone was so silent. And then the rest of the movie happens, but then it kind of works well with the ending also, I know. I loved the ending of this film, and I'll actually talk about the mid-credit scene later, but I kind of wish it didn't happen, because I think this movie ended perfectly. I don't think they should have had a post-credit scene. But, you know, this entire movie, Shuri's struggling with loss and grief. She loses T'Challa, she loses her mom, which we'll talk about here in a bit. And Ramonda says the thing of, you have to let go, you have to burn the funeral garb and let it go. And Shuri's like, I won't let it go, I'm going to burn the world. And at the very end of it, she goes to Haiti, which, by the way, it's so cool, because you hear, it's like, oh yeah, Shuri has to go do something, and it shows all the things she might be doing. You see, Warrior Falls, where it's like, oh yeah, she has to have her little fight, but then M'Baku comes out, he's like, nah, Shuri's gone. I'm gonna fight for the throne, though. Which, side note, I guess, does this mean that M'Baku's gonna be king and Shuri's gonna be Black Panther? Is that what they're doing going forward? Because I think that would be quite cool. Because M'Baku's a great leader, and we know Shuri hates leading. So I think if Shuri's Black Panther and M'Baku's the king, I think that'd be a good way to go. And then it cuts to Ross in the back of the FBI truck, and you think Shuri's going to save him. But no, it's Okoye in her Midnight Angel armor. And then it cuts to Haiti, and that's where she is. And there's a fire. She builds a little fire on the beach and burns the funeral garb. And once again, it's silent. And then you could hear, or you could feel the mood of the theater go whoosh down. Everyone was so depressed, and it's quiet again. She puts it on the flames, and there's just these, this great shot of Shuri sitting there, and you just hear the burning. You just hear the fire going. That's the only sound. No music. It's not loud. It's so quiet. And I had to move. I remember sitting in the theater chair, and I was like, I need to move. I'm not in the most comfortable position right now, but I'm scared to move. So I was just sitting there for like 2 minutes, just trying to be dead silent. No one was eating. No one was drinking. No one was moving. It was dead silent in the theater as this film ended. And there's this beautiful visual. Shuri said she was going to burn the world if she had to burn T'Challa's funeral garb. And she did it during a sunset when it looks like the horizon's on fire and the world is burning. Let's talk about Shuri's arc. I would talk about the mid-credit scene, but because I've been talking all about Shuri in this video, let's keep talking about Shuri for a bit more. Protagonist, one of the best Marvel heroes as of officially with this film. I think this is one of the best character arcs we've seen in the MCU. I think she was written beautifully, and I cannot wait to see this movie again just for Shuri's arc. And her struggling with grief and loss and revenge throughout this entire movie, and being in this state where she's really like, I don't know what to do, like, shit, man. I'm depressed all the time, and her arc is a perfect mirror to T'Challa's arc in Civil War. In Civil War, T'Challa was so consumed by revenge after Zemo killed his father, and in this movie, Shuri was so consumed by revenge after Namor killed her mother. And they even had the thing of vengeance consuming you, which is what T'Challa said to Zemo in Civil War. It's a perfect mirror, and that's where the beauty of Killmonger in this movie is. He's just a cameo, but he's arguably the most crucial and important character in this story. Because Killmonger is essentially saying that Shuri is becoming him, of what her goals are. And it's such a short scene, but it's so friggin' well written, of just those two in the fiery, flooded throne room, and Killmonger's like, you're me, cousin, sorry, but that's the way it is. And how that then influences Shuri from that moment forward. And I, by the way, just love when, because she takes the herb, right? She makes the synthetic heart-shaped herb, and something I like is that at no point in the movie did Shuri say, I want to be Black Panther. Shuri became Black Panther because really that was the only option. She was trying to make this herb, and she's like, shit, we gotta try it. And she tries it. And it feels like something that she needs to live up to. It's this thing that Shuri feels like she needs to do, and that's why she does it. And then she goes and kicks just all the ass. But I love when she first gets out of it, after she sees Killmonger, and she refuses to believe that that's who she saw. She just straight up says, it didn't work. Is it Okoye's the one in the room with her, right? Is it Okoye or Nakia? It's one of them, but she's like, no, it didn't work. And she goes to punch. She punches a Dora Milaje outfit in anger and blasts it across the room. And they're like, oh shit. And then she becomes the Black Panther, which almost made me cry in a different way. That was like, I almost had the most bittersweet tears ever when Black Panther dropped down into Jabari land after a phenomenal build-up, I will say, of everyone being like, man, what the hell are we supposed to do? And then you see him look up as the Royal Talon comes over and the figure just drops out of it and then hits the ground. It's a new Black Panther. And yeah, the music that's going, Ludwig Görance's new theme for Black Panther was incredible. I've been listening to it on loop over and over. It sounds so awesome. The moment that M'Baku gets up and they're looking at Shuri in this outfit and he yells, "The Black Panther lives," best scene in the entire movie. I cannot wait for it to hit Disney Plus so I can just start rewinding that scene and watching it over and over and over. When he said, "The Black Panther lives," I had a full body chill, and the theater was jam-packed. It was pretty damn hot in there, so I know it wasn't because I was cold. Everything had goosebumps. I think my forehead had goosebumps when M'Baku yelled, "The Black Panther lives." The fact that this movie has the Black Panther in it for only a few minutes, but is more about the Black Panther than the first Black Panther movie. This one, the entire movie centers around that idea, sort of. It doesn't center around the idea of who's going to take the mantle, but so much of the movie centers around Black Panther's gone. We frankly don't want a new Black Panther. We need a new Black Panther, but like, who cares, really? And the whole theme of the movie is life and the Black Panther living on again. And Shuri's a hell of a Black Panther, but I'm going to talk about that when I get into the third act. There's a lot of stuff I want to talk about there. But let's talk about Namor, or Namor, they call him both, but the reason he's called Namor in the movie, it's such a beautiful story. When they were doing Namor's origin, holy shit, that was peak cinema. Namor, so his people, they succumbed to smallpox, and they found their little herb thing, because there wasn't just one vibranium meteorite, which is something a lot of people speculate. As they said, is Talokan a vibranium city? Which it is, because there were multiple meteorites. And they have something similar to the heart-shaped herb, and they take it, and it turns them blue, and it makes them creatures of the water, and Namor is kind of half and half, just because of, stuff. They don't explain how he became half and half. I just assumed it's because he was already a natural human baby when his mother turned into a Talo-Kanil, so then it affected him in a way that he looks human but has a couple different traits. And they straight up say the word mutant. He says, "I am a mutant." So, hell yeah, it was you knew the theater was excited, but it's the only time the theater there was a, auditory response from the audience. He said, "I am a mutant," and then you just heard, whispering back and forth. People are like, "Yo." And so the reason he got his name is after his mom died hundreds of years later or whatever. They get there, they witness the white man's there. We got slavery, shit going on that's nuts. And the Talo-Kanil start attacking, and someone calls him El Niño Sin Amor, which is a child without love. El Niño Sin Amor, Namor. You got it. Yes. So the reason I like calling him Namor instead of Namor is because if you call him Namor, you don't get the child without love aspect of it. And that's so crucial to what this version of the character is, that I really want to try to call him Namor, or else I don't get the meaning of the character. And that's the reason Talokan looks the way it does, is because it's just a straight up Mesoamerican city. It was those people that went underwater and implemented the architecture and the culture they knew under the water, which is how we get Talokan. And Namor is easily one of the best Marvel villains. He just wants to save his people, and it's so perfect. He gives me Magneto vibes, and it's like I struggle to call him a villain. I almost don't want to call him a villain, because in fact he spends most of the movie as not an ally, but he's not really trying to wreak havoc until provoked. Think of what he does. Shuri's like, "Hey, take me, don't kill her." They're like, "Okay." And then Namor is like, "I'll show you our city. I'll show you why this is so important to us. I'll show you what we're fighting for. And then we're gonna see, but it's important that you see this." And he's so, I'd argue, a good guy throughout the movie, honestly. I would argue he's not a bad guy until he's provoked, because Ramonda, who is justifiably angry, and she fires Okoye and all that, but then Okoye gets a promotion to a Midnight Angel and she can fly now, but she's justifiably angry because she lost her husband, she lost her son, and now she thinks her daughter might be dead, and she's like, "I need you to go get her right now and not lose another family member." And it's in that haste that they don't listen, that Nakia doesn't listen to Shuri, and she just starts opening fire on the Talo-Kanil to save the last member of the Queen's family. And that's what provokes war. And it's Ramonda's flaw that she is so adamant on not losing another person that that's what gets her killed. The flooding of Wakanda is a phenomenal action sequence from beginning to end. I'm just going to run through the entire flooding of Wakanda, basically beat for beat, and just talk about why it's so well done and why it's one of the better Marvel action sequences. And I even said in my non-spoiler review, I wasn't a fan of the action, but the flooding of Wakanda is not an action sequence. It's just a set piece that has, a couple bits of action in it. But because it starts with this little heartfelt conversation between Nakia and Okoye that we saw in the trailer. And then you see water. See a bit of water coming in. And you're like, oh shit. And they go to check it out. And I love how it hits. I think it's Okoye that it hits, and she sees it and immediately is like, oh, we're under attack. And then you see the walls start to blow in. And obviously the whole country doesn't flood. They're not on the ocean. They're on a river. So parts of it flood. But you see all the walls blowing and people getting sucked away. And I'm pretty sure there's not music for a fair amount of it as the initial carnage comes in. Of everyone going through, and you see like Nakia running through a house trying to get someone, and right as they get outside, the water keeps coming and they try to run the other way, and Okoye's got a kid getting washed down river, and all the main characters are scattered for this. And that's what I love, is seeing all of our principal characters in different spots. So obviously Okoye and Nakia are on the ground. They're just in the normal city of Wakanda because Okoye got fired. Nakia's just a citizen at this point. And so the two of them are trying to get people out. Then you have Ao leading the Dora Milaje, being like, all right, dispatch people, get vehicles and shit. We got to get everyone out of here. You have Shuri and Aneka in the ships, in a ship flying around with other people. Then you have Ramonda and Riri in the throne room. And I think my favorite part of this whole thing was actually M'Baku. M'Baku is a great character in this movie. And my favorite thing about it is the moment Wakanda floods. Everyone's just in shock of what to do. It's before anyone else goes into action. It's before Shuri takes off. It's before Okoye and Nakia are even ready to get people out. M'Baku sees the initial wave of water come in and immediately jumps into the water. He does not hesitate. He doesn't try to coordinate with the other Jabari and be like, all right, here's what we're doing. He's just like, hold this, and he jumps in to save people. And if that doesn't say that M'Baku would be a great king for Wakanda, I don't know what does. M'Baku, one of the best characters in this movie, and that scene made him one of my favorites. I know it's such a simple scene, and it's like, obviously he's gonna help because he's a good guy, but it's just his mindset of, I'm not waiting to figure out what the game plan is. I'm going straight into that water no matter what. I did get scared for him a couple times. I knew he was going to survive because he's on the boat in the marketing of the movie. But when he goes underwater and he sees the friggin' whale come in with the Talo Kanil, I was like, get out of there, M'Baku! Yeah, it's so cool because then you have Namor jumping around. Because he uses his wings. It's the best example of him flying in the movie. Because he doesn't fly. He hovers, and then he kind of jumps through the air. And you see him jumping, and he's cutting through all these vehicles because his spear is vibranium. Because remember, they have vibranium too. And it's just so cool to see everyone trying to shoot him, everyone trying to get him, and nothing works. He cuts through the ships. Shuri and Aneka do no damage. Shuri and Aneka actually crash. They crash into the water, and then I think it was Okoye and Nakia that beamed them back up because they had the ships up in the air trying to get people out. And it's such a layered fight too, because you have obviously the Talo Kanil in the water, M'Baku down on the shoreline also with some of the Jabari. You have them pulling people into the water, you have people on dry land, and then you have people up in the air. So it's a layered thing that the entire country, that's really, I guess not the whole country, the main city, that the city is dealing with at that point, that it's so layered. It would have been very easy to just have the fight at the water, but Ryan Coogler is like, no, we need to show how the whole city's reacting to this, and just you see everything. There's not a single person in the city at that moment who's not doing some shit. And the other moment I was worried for M'Baku was when he jumped off the ship. It was so friggin' badass. This is why M'Baku's my boy. He sees Namor, and he's like, the fish man. He's so excited. And he jumps off the ship to hit him, and Namor blocks the club and slow-mo punches M'Baku, breaks the armor, launches M'Baku way backwards into like a shed, and M'Baku is just like, oh, like he's just so relieved that he had his armor on. It was Such a badass moment. There's no backup. I'd also like to point out, Namor was surrounded by his people. Namora was there, a couple of the other Talo Kanil were there, and M'Baku's like, I don't care, I'm gonna kill that guy. But the flooding of Wakanda ends with what I'm assuming was in the original script for this film that then still worked with the film, so they kept it in, but that is the death of the Queen. When Namor goes and talks to her, and you're worried as shit, and I figured she was gonna die, but Namor goes to talk to her, shoves the spear through the glass, makes a little hole, and they're just chatting. They're chatting about stuff, and Namor's like, all right, fine. Because Ramona's like, we're not doing this shit. And he's like, okay. So he leaves, and for a second you're like, are we okay? And then he comes back with like freaking 12 of those water grenades, which by the way are awesome. I love those. He comes back with them, throws them all at the window, and just blows it. And you see the entire throne room get a rush of water. And Riri and Ramonda disappear into the water, and you're like, shit, where are they? And another friggin' moment in this movie that almost made me cry is when everyone gets into the throne room, Okoye gets there, and she starts trying, they use their little Komoyo beads as little CPR devices, it's cool. They're trying to get both Riri and Ramonda back, and Shuri walks in and sees it all happening, and Okoye's like, you gotta get her out of here, and it's such, This movie's so good. You ever have a moment where you're talking about something and you're like, holy shit, it's good. They're like, we gotta get Shuri out of here. And she's not leaving. And I think, is it Ao? I can't remember who initially grabbed Shuri, but they try to get her out. And she keeps trying to fight her way to her mom. Riri comes back, the Queen won't. And then M'Baku grabs Shuri, and they're trying to hold her back from being stupid, and then the Queen dies. And I remember thinking it was going to be hard for me to sympathize with Namor now that he has killed Angela Bassett. But, you know, then the rest of the movie happens. So, yes, flooding of Wakanda, friggin' amazing. Not my favorite scene in the movie. My favorite scene in the movie, as I mentioned, was Shuri coming in as the new Black Panther. The Black Panther lives. We went over this. But favorite whole entire sequence in the film is the entire flooding of Wakanda. That was so good. That was executed to perfection. I don't think there's a world where the flooding of Wakanda is any better than it was in that. But let's talk about some stuff I wasn't a fan of. So, let's talk about my negatives with this movie. And then I'll segue kind of into the third act. I think this is a good way to segue. Ross and Val. So this is, when I said non-spoiler, I know what I would take out. Basically this. I would reduce Ross's role. So he's only in those first couple scenes, but I would not bring Val into this movie. If she's in it for, I don't, because it feels like it seems like the obligatory MCU shit. And they needed to have the fun side characters who get a chuckle out of you. That's what this whole side quest felt like. And I think there was a much better way they could have done this, where Ross comes in, helps, and gets away with it, possibly. But I don't think we need to keep cutting back to this, because the Wakanda and Talokan stuff is so cool. And if Ross was, you could argue that, oh, Ross is in here to kind of help push this storyline of the world against Wakanda, but like, that didn't accomplish anything that the UN stuff with Angela Bassett didn't accomplish. So, I don't really know what the point of it was. And I like Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Val. I think she's a cool character. I think she has fun with this character, but I don't need that much of the character. I don't feel like. I think she's great in her small doses, in her little cameo appearances, but she was in a lot of this movie, and it got to the point where I was like, all right, I don't need more Val. Then there's Cambridge, and this sequence, I think, was kind of supposed to be the Korea chase from the first film, which, as I mentioned in non-spoilers, there's not a single action scene in this movie that touches that Korean chase scene. That's a great scene, but you have Okoye and Shuri, who are a great combo, going to get Riri. They're like, yeah, come to Wakanda. They want to kill you. And what I did like, I think I liked how the chase started. The chase as a whole, I wasn't the world's biggest fan of, but the way it starts of Okoye getting in the car and Riri getting her suit on and Shuri taking the motorcycle. And the way when they first bust in, they're like, oh, she's got an Iron Man suit. And then she blasts that dude out and flies off. That was cool. But the chase itself wasn't too memorable. Really, what I remember from it, besides what I saw in the trailer 18,000 times of Okoye with the spear through the back, is just Riri mirroring Iron Man, where she starts falling back down to Earth and then wakes up and catches herself. But there wasn't anything super memorable until the crash. I think the crash was amazing because Cambridge itself was like it was a fun side quest, but wasn't that cool. And then you see the slow-mo water grenade blow off and just whoa. And I wonder if this was the stunt that Letitia Wright hurt herself doing. What I did like was Okoye's fight. I think Okoye got a great fight scene of her against Atuma because she fights off those other Atlanteans. And then she fights Atuma. And I like the conflict she has with Atuma throughout the movie, of them saying warrior to each other and then fighting. That was so cool. I just love the whole fight with Atuma. How it felt so raw, you know? Like, it wasn't exciting. It wasn't super hyped up. It was just the sound design of them fighting. I loved the fight with Atuma. I am kind of upset that M'Baku didn't get that rivalry. Don't Atuma and M'Baku seem like they would be great rivals? Like, come on. It would have been great, but I didn't get an M'Baku-Atuma fight. Alright, third act. I'm very conflicted on the third act of this movie. So, they're like, we have to dry him out. And I'm like, we're gonna dry... So basically they have to stick Namor in a sauna. So the plan, what they do, they get a boat in the Atlantic Ocean with all the Wakandans on it. Which I thought was cool, seeing them all mobilized into battle. You've got M'Baku leading the Jabari, Nakia leading a bunch of people, Ao leading the Dora Milaje, because she's the head of the Dora Milaje now, because Okoye and Aneka are the two Midnight Angels. And you have everyone led behind Shuri, and they're on that boat. Boat decloaks itself. Boom! Alright, Wakanda versus Talokan. And it didn't feel as exciting as it should be. I did like Shuri yelling at Bombay, like her brother did, to rally them all. But once everyone gets onto the boat, it hits me this doesn't feel super exciting. The exciting part happens once Shuri and Namor leave. So they get... It's a joint effort. Oh yeah, you also got Riri there in her new suit, which I think looks awesome. I love her suit design. It just looks a little too CGI for me, but I love that the whole suit is shaped like a heart. So everyone's there. Everyone's there. And they get Namor onto the ship that is, I mean, the heat's just cranked all the way up on it, and it's starting to dry him out. And you can see he's weakening. And he has a bit of a tussle with Shuri. They fight for a couple seconds, and she's like, all right, we gotta get into the desert. And he destroys the ship, and it blows up, and boom, they both land in the desert. And now we have two different fights going on. So we have the boat fight with, you know, our other characters, M'Baku, Nakia, Okoye, Aneka, Ao, Atuma, and Namora. And, you know, they're in their armies are fighting on this ship that feels so incredibly small. And, that's all fine and dandy. Not exciting. Riri's there also. That's not exciting. I didn't really care for that. Then you have the significantly cooler, much more exciting, and much more emotionally rich one-on-one fight with Shuri and Namor. I did not like the one-on-one in the first Black Panther film. It was too CGI. I didn't like it. This one, on the other hand, beautiful. You have, it feels like real punches. When Namor's punching Shuri, it feels like those are real hits she's taking. When Shuri rips the wing off of Namor's ankle and then claws him several times, those feel like real hits he's taking. He got the ring ripped off, and I was like, oh, like, yes, that's what I need from a character with friggin' claws for hands, is shit like that. When you have two people who are in impenetrable suits, when they exploit the weaknesses, those should feel like painful hits. In the first Black Panther, it never felt like that. In this film, though, every time they found that character's weakness, those felt like painful hits. And then, because vibranium can pierce vibranium, which it's funny because vibranium can pierce vibranium, but T'Challa and Killmonger couldn't pierce each other's suits. And yeah, Namor stabbed Shuri through the stomach, which at first I'm like, how's she gonna survive this? Then I remembered the heart-shaped herb is cool as shit. And Shuri got her ass up and continued to whoop ass. And I love what defeats Namor is the Wakanda Forever. Because she is like, well, if I blow up this ship, that'll dry him the hell out real quick. And so she does that, and the ship explodes and just torches his back, and it dries him out. And, you know, almost kills him. And I was worried. I was like, Ryan Coogler, you did not just kill Namor. And thankfully he didn't. He's too smart for that. But Shuri gets him to yield, just like her brother would do. And in doing so, you know, both countries can now live in peace. Not as allies, but as, you know, not enemies. And I love the little bit of everyone on the ship right as the Talo Kanil are about to win. They are so close to killing all the main characters. And they see, they look, and they see Namor and Shuri. Both there. And, yeah, the Black Panther united them. Let's talk about a couple more things with Shuri in terms of her arc I think we should talk about. First, I wish this movie had a moment that addressed that her powers are a gift from both Wakanda and Talokan. I think it would have made her unifying them all the more powerful because she used Wakandan tech and a combination of what Namor gave her to create the synthetic heart-shaped herb. It was Wakandan gifts and Talo Kanil gifts that were able to create the new Black Panther. And also, there was a moment and when she creates this strand, right? She creates the strand and the DNA shows up. And it's all green. And I think they said it was a 99.7% success rate. And I was in the theater, I'm like, holy shit, she just saved T'Challa. That would have saved T'Challa. But since it's too late, now we have Shuri, who gets to do it. Those are the last little bits of Shuri's arc I needed to touch on that were so perfect. So let's talk about the big credit scene in this movie. That, I really like this. I'm gonna get some hate for this. I really like the idea of the mid-credit scene. I do not like the execution of the mid-credit scene. I was actually quite disappointed in the mid-credit scene because everyone was hyping it up. But the moment I got out of it, I just kept asking questions and had a bunch of plot holes. So what I like the idea that T'Challa had a kid. And that this T'Challa is also named T'Challa, and it gives us a world where we can continue to tell T'Challa stories. I mean, think about the time the next Black Panther comes out. Prince T'Challa will probably be a teenager, right? So we can still tell T'Challa stories with a different T'Challa. It's a great way around that. He also might be a young Avenger, which, shit, that might be cool. Let's talk about where my issue is with this. Shuri and T'Challa were tight. I mean, they were, like, legitimately best friends, these two. But I guess fuck Shuri, because everyone else in the world gets to know that T'Challa had a kid. You know, Nakia brought him to Haiti, because she's like, I'm gonna take him out of that, not have him, you know, have the burden of king, no heir to the throne type shit. I'm just gonna take him to Haiti. And then they let Ramonda meet him. Everyone knew he had a kid. Except Shuri. And part of me was like, well, maybe there's an explanation for this. So I think about it, I'm like, he probably would have had a kid. And then, you know, Shuri and him were both dust for 5 years. And then Shuri comes back. And then he died, I think, a year after Endgame. And then this movie's 2 years after Endgame because there's a 1 year later time jump. And so I'm like, yeah, you know, then she came back, then T'Challa died, and then they had their own stuff to deal with. That hit me. There was a year of nothing. There was a year where everyone was good. So why the hell did they not tell Shuri that she had a nephew? Did I miss something? Am I the idiot here? Like, Shuri and T'Challa loved each other so much, and he didn't even tell his own sister that he had a child. Now, he didn't tell her he was sick, but that is more understandable. But he didn't tell his own sister that he had a child. Now, all they had to do was have one bit where I think it would have been cool if there was a moment where they're like, he might have been in danger, we had to keep him a secret. Which would have been fine, but instead she's like, yeah, we just didn't want to burden him with the throne, but, you know, the queen met him. And Ramona didn't tell Shuri, T'Challa didn't tell Shuri, Nakia didn't tell Shuri, no one told Shuri. It just seems weird to me. It seems very out of character for T'Challa to do. Is not tell his sister that she's an auntie. But in terms of symbolism, I do adore the post-credit scene in terms of all that, but it just raises too many questions. And it's not written as tight as the movie, because this movie's written so tight. This is going to be a weird analogy. It's like The Phantom Menace, but like good, because everything in The Phantom Menace is so tightly woven that it's like, not much you can do. This is the same way. Everything's so tightly woven together, but the movie actually turned out good. And then the post-credit scene feels like it was written in like a day because they needed a post-credit scene. Like, they had 2 years to work on this movie, and the post-credit scene has a plot hole. T'Challa that was an out-of-character moment, frankly. Shuri, by all accounts, should have known. And there's no reason they shouldn't have told her. But anyway, whatever. I digress. I'm not going to keep getting upset about the mid-credit scene, because the rest of the movie was so great. It is incredible. But anyway, I have to go make other videos. So I'm going to go do that. So there you guys go. That is my spoiler review on Black Panther Wakanda Forever. What did you think of the film, as well as my thoughts in this video? Let me know down in the comments below. Also leave a like on the video, subscribe, click on the bell icon to receive all notifications from the MCU. That's going to be it. Have a great day, guys.